again, I can't be prescriptive about how they should do it.
Yeah.
But one of the things they have to be careful about is when you try and intervene too often and try and have these controlled declines in markets, what happens is you ultimately undermine market confidence. At the end of the day, markets have to know that there's true wave flows of liquidity, that's ability to get in and ability to get out. And when you try and manipulate too often, controlling exit access for markets, that's something that investors don't like to see. And that's when typically people get more jittery about the liquidity and transparency in a market.
Certainly do. Mike, thank you so much. Brian, Stuart, Phil, Laurie Rothman, thank you all so much for joining us. That's it for Countdown to the Closing Bell. What another day it has been. Now let's go over to David Asman and Melissa Francis to bring it home, guys.
Thank you very much, Ashley. It is a bad day, and it was started by events overseas, a rogue nuclear nation, even more out of control than it usually is. North Korea claiming it exploded a hydrogen bomb. That prompted a lot of international outrage and skepticism, but very few specifics about how to tame this monster.
And the presidential candidates all speaking out on this new potential nuclear threat coming up. Rand Paul will tell us what he thinks should be done right now.
Always like to hear him. And troubling new evidence about the decline of the American dream. More than half of all Americans now have no savings in place to cover an emergency like a medical bill or car repair.
But first, to another big sell-off on Wall Street. The Dow down nearly 250 points, on track to end under 17,000 for the first time since October, as the closing bells sound right now on Wall Street. Here's a look at where we are ending the day. The Dow down 247 points. The S&P 500, look at that, down 1.3%. The Nasdaq almost 1.2%. Look at crude oil, David.
5.5% decline on crude oil. And of course, that led the markets down. 29 of 30 Dow stocks in the red. Walmart is the only one moving higher. We have now lost over 500 points in the Dow so far this year. Laurie Rothman standing by at the New York Stock Exchange. Laurie, what was driving today's sell-off?
Well, as you know, David and Melissa, the negative sentiment started first thing this morning with that news out of North Korea that they successfully tested the hydrogen bomb. And then, of course, we got the Fed meeting minutes mid-afternoon Eastern time suggesting that some of the Fed members were a little cautious about raising interest rates, pointing to the fact that there's no inflation in the economy, or very little, in fact. So the selling accelerated at that point. But it's important to note that despite the 1.5% declines today across the broad markets, it's actually off the worst levels of the session. Oil, the main culprit. I know you'll talk about that through the hour, but you have a 7-year low for the price of crude. So that just hammered the energy sector here on Wall Street, off about 4% when all was said and done. So the Dow will close down 250 below the key psychological mark of 17,000, 16,908. Another volatile session. You had the VIX up about 7%, coming down, stabilizing around 20.4.